You may be seated. All right, so thank you everyone for coming today. So my name is Regina Bouley. I'm the Archives and Special Collections Librarian here. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists, just give a little brief blurb to kind of tell you why they're on this panel. And then we will go ahead and have questions and discussion among the panelists for the first half hour, and then the second half hour we'll open up for questions as questions arise. So I'll go ahead and go from left to right, just so that way I don't skip around. So our first panelist is Pat Rogers. So she has been a PA assistant to George R. R. Martin and to James S.A. Corey, which is not a person, it's two people. And so she's giving us some valuable insights as far as the sort of those nuts and those bolts and getting it done professionally. And so thank you so much for joining us. She's our last minute addition. And so just write her name on your program if you
or not.
Maybe depending on what you say, you can let them know at the end. Our next panelist, you may have already seen her speak, is Darcie Little Badger. She's our 2024. Wait, what year is it? 2025.
Yeah, no, we're good.
Yeah. Sorry, I just came here from the past. Everything's wrong.
I thought Martha Wells would be here today because I saw 2024. I was like,
oh, 2025 guest of honor, the Jack Williamson Lectureship. Her critically acclaimed novel, Latsoe, won the Lopes Award for Best First Novel. You may have heard in the keynote that she spoke on a podcast back in the beginning of her writing career. She had just had an online reading in April 4th, I think it was, Strong Women, Strange Worlds, which is a great podcast that will have a panel of readers giving a little bit of their work. And then on her website, she provides information about herself, her works, and what she's up to. After this panel, if you wanted to, you can view a flyer for our guest authors, where I've listed their websites so you can find more information and see kind of the things they're talking about, the events they're going to, and the blogs and their socials. Our next panelist is Arkady Martine, who is our 2023 Jack Williamson guest of honor, and we are happy to have her back this year. Her social media presence has largely focused on short form posts on Blue Sky, so that's something that we can kind of talk about. Is what are the different ways that authors can engage with their audiences. She's also appeared at conventions such as WorldCon and Bubonicon. And our final panelist is Lauren C. Teffeau. She's a French lectureship, and we're happy to have her back for another year. In March, Bookworks, an indie bookstore in Albuquerque, co-hosted a release party for her and Serena Ulibarri. She had an online reading this past January and in 2021 on that same podcast, Strong Women, Strange Worlds. And she's also appeared at conventions such as Cosign, Mile High Con, and Bubonicon. So I'm going to go ahead and I will just open up with an initial question, and I have lots of questions. And if we don't get to any of them, that is a-okay as discussion flows. But my first question is, there's a variety of reader engagement from author-led newsletter to paying someone else approach and more. What factors do you think influence authors in making their choices for how they will engage with readers, with audiences, and how might they change their approach? So whoever would like to, I feel fervently about this, let me start.
Well, let me just start because I want us to end. I think it's different for every author. I know with George, he's got such a big fan base, George R. R. Martin, that his not a blog is what's really coming from George. Only George writes that. Some of his other venues that he will be seen on, Facebook or something, he lets his assistants know what he wants, but they're mostly writing it. He's not sitting there on Facebook. And his blog he only does every now and then because, despite what you might think, he works all the time. I mean, the man is always working. from in the morning when he first gets in until 7 or 8 at night, he's in the office and he's working. He just has a lot of projects, and he's a grown man. He'll do what he wants to when he wants to. But as far as fans go, mostly, I mean, obviously I've been working with George and with Daniel and Ty, and George gets a tremendous amount of fan mail, and mostly it would be me, handling the fan mail, what needs to happen here. But like Daniel and Ty like Reddit, and they will interact with people on Reddit all the time. They actually read that a lot. Their Facebook page, not much. And I get all of their fan mail, both electronically and paper, and then figure out, but it's not like George, the difference in amount is huge. But they do what they can, and they kind of enjoy chatting with people on Reddit. At least that's Daniel and Ty. Like I said, George does his blog when he really wants to say something. And none of us who have ever worked for him try to say much of anything about anything, because, you say something casual and then it's on entertainment. So, there are things that,
The horror.
it's like people ask me questions and I'm like, no, I'm not going to answer that.
It is honestly one of my goals to never be successful enough. That's a problem for me. And I mean that literally. I'm not.
And actually, Daniel and Ty feel the same way. They like paying the bills. That's all good. But they never want to be as visible as George, because that kind of visibility means you never really have a quiet thing. And that is something that they think about. They have the example. And it's hard, because George is a nice guy, but it's hard that you never finish a meal. So, anyway.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, social media is weird for me in that I don't want to be too big. So I quit Twitter before it was cool and when it was still Twitter, because I said when I get 10,000 people, I'm quitting, because I don't want to have too much of a following. And so I got 10,000 people, and I think everyone thought I was joking, but I wasn't. So I don't know if I will. I've now kind of consolidated my author accounts to Blue Sky. And I guess I kind of have to right now be on Instagram until I find a better way to post my photos and videos. But I have my author stuff, and I try to, post what I feel comfortable being quoted in an article, like you say, because the first time that happened to me, I was a little bit like, oh, I didn't know they could do that. Okay.
Yeah.
But then I have my secret accounts. So I have an account for my pug that's actually pretty big, but it's secret. And then I have an account for Twitch streaming that's me playing video games, and I'm just interacting with a whole different group of people who aren't there for my books. They're just there to see me play like Starfield. And so I just enjoy having that kind of escape from my author persona.
You can just have fun.
Yeah, and so I think that's important, at least for me, because like you say, different authors are, different people. I genuinely, if I had an account that was big, I'd quit it, because that's just the way I am. I don't want to be too big that I can't just say what I want to.
Yeah. I have a Blue Sky. I used to have a Twitter. I am of the age of social media generations where I used Twitter as a professional kind of workplace tool. Like, this was where all the other people in my field, whether that was science fiction or Byzantine history or energy policy, were hanging out and having conversations. And I used it that way. I'm a really text-oriented person. I don't do a lot of photos and videos. I actually hate doing video and try to avoid it if at all possible. I like taking photos, but I like taking photos for art reasons, not like for social media reasons. So it's been a kind of conscious decision on my part that my social media is not a marketing tool for my books. My social media is a place where I am being a professional working writer and various other things in public. Which means sometimes I wrote a thread on Blue Sky about really missing my father, who died a couple years ago. And I do personal stuff like that. And a couple days ago, I was really angry about some political things, and I was angry in public about them. But they're this sort of and I also announce like, I'm gonna be here at this lovely thing, and this is where you can buy a book, and it's awesome that people nominated this story for an award. But I have always treated social media as a reflection of the person I am in the world. One of the reasons I've stuck with it, at least the text-based ones, is that there aren't a lot of spaces where I get to be all of the versions of me all at once. And first Twitter and now Blue Sky are one of the only online places where that's easy to do. And there's been surprising and lovely things that have come out of that. Like the time I did a reading and the commissioner, the chair of the New Mexico Regulation Commission showed up. And I was like, I don't know who I am right now because you're Commissioner O'Connell and I need to like talk about transmission lines with you, but also you're Pat and you want me to sign a book?
Oh,
Which was lovely, but like that kind of serendipitous thing where you feel like you're actually a real person has been why I've stuck with it. I'm bad at marketing. I think my publicists despair of me a little because I just don't market well, I guess. I get weird about it, and I'm actually a very private person with a very public persona. So there's a couple of lines I just will not cross at all. And it's like, there are not pictures of the inside of my house, there never will be. I don't post photographs of people I don't know without asking their permission, that kind of thing. I don't really do, on my own time, promotional video. So I don't know. I did just sort of in the general scheme of like each author is different. There was a point about a year and a half ago where I did hire an assistant, and that was because I had gotten overwhelmed and I wasn't doing a good job of answering like legitimate business invitations or fan mail. Because it was just like, no, I have to make decisions, and also people want to tell me things I don't want to know about them. Like the parasocial thing is super weird. It's like, I'm really glad you had many feelings, but now I know about you and I don't know you. Which I think some people really like getting to make those connections. And I find them difficult just because of the person I am. But hiring an assistant was great because now all of that gets packaged up into here are your 6 tasks for this week. And then I can just do them. I think that was something I did like a decade into my career as a published writer and after 2 books that won major awards. So it was not like something I did early, and I only did it out of necessity. I mean, I love my assistant who is also my friend, but like it was a weird decision for me to make that I needed to outsource some of that.
So I'm a little bit different. I hate social media. I also have a master's degree in mass comm, and I know too much about it and how it operates to really buy into it in a lot of different ways. But I did do Twitter for a very long time. I actually preferred Twitter like Arkady for many reasons, mostly because it could scan so easily and I'd learn so much and I'd be inspired by so many different brains on the online at the same time. It was great. And it drove a lot of traffic to my website at the time, and then that stopped, and then Twitter became evil, and then I left that for Blue Sky. Never really built back my following that I had on Twitter, and that's one of those platforms where some people have mastered it, and I just don't have the time or the interest at this point. And I also have a background in libraries, so I am very much focused on my website. I am focused on that in terms of having all the information, all the links, all the press, all the related stories, all the information you can find on me is on my website in a very like clearly delineated way, because that is like my base. And when I'm updating that, I still blog, but it's like now I'm just calling it news, right? So it's like an event like this, I'll have a recap of that on there and things like that. And so I really resent the fact that we're in a place right now with the promotion machines where you have to be on Reddit, you have to be on Instagram, you have to be on Blue Sky, you have to have a Linktree, you have to be on BookBub and all of these places because it's just splinters the attention. And the argument is that then you have the opportunity to capture all these people from these different places and funnel them to where you want them to go, and that can work, absolutely. But I'm either doing it wrong or just I write weird things and it just pull from weird places, and so it just doesn't always kind of come together as a cohesive whole. And so figuring out what my author brand and those kinds of terms as something I've always also resisted, because I feel like it cheapens what I do, and I fight against that a lot.
Well, now I want to turn to our first part of our panel titles, marketing, and the second part is minglings. We've been talking about social media. I'd like to kind of flip it on the other side, social interactions with people's faces. So if you're, whether it's you're online and speaking in like a webcast kind of situation, or someone is like at a signing or at a reading, how do you handle your persona? Do you think about that persona you've built online, or do you divorce that, or how do you handle? And I will just go the opposite way. So Lauren, if you'd like to start.
I am an introvert. I don't like these kinds of spaces at all. No, I say that, and I also put myself in these positions often to kind of desensitize me to these kinds of interactions. And so I, from a very early on, when I first started publishing, Bhubanicon was very welcoming to me. That's our local science fiction and fantasy convention. And they started putting me on panels pretty early on. And as nerve-wracking as it was, I was so grateful for that experience, because it makes an interaction like today a lot easier because I had that experience. And so by doing those things, by interacting with fans after those sessions, by moving through those spaces, that helped tremendously in terms of giving me the experience, I think, to kind of manage that situation. I try to be as open to, I try to match the energy that people bring to me, and I'm not very good at bringing energy to them. And I know that about myself. So I think it'll be different for everybody. I think sometimes it's an unfair ask for writers to have to move into these spaces. And I have to say, like watching Arkady and Darcie, manage events like this, it's super inspiring, and I'm sure it might be interesting to hear how you made those changes.
I'm also an introvert, but I like to describe myself as the world's least shy introvert. I actually really like people and parties and social stuff. And then I have to go and stare at a wall for 48 hours. So I come from a family of performing artists. I am the least performing of my artist family. Both of my parents are classical musicians. My brother manages jazz bands, and his wife sings, and like on stage is good. I like on stage. It's the part that I have always found hardest is individual interaction that happens quickly, like especially like in a signing line, because you really want to, because a person made a choice to not only buy your book, but stand in a line to get a minute with you, and you want that to be good. At least I really do. I want that to be a good experience for that person. And then there are 20 of them, and I have to pull that off every time. And that's hard. So when I started going to conventions, and I did that when I was only barely published, because I was lucky enough that through a sort of pre-modern version of social media, through LiveJournal, if any of you remember that, I had a lot of friends who were writers who were already in the field, who kind of took me under their wing and introduced me to their friends and to like how to be at a science fiction convention. So I had an advantage there. But when I started moving into a more professional role at some of these, I have learned I have to build in time afterward, and spaces in between being on and doing the performance, which is not like, it's not a full space, it's just a projection. It feels very organic, it's very real. You were talking about how like, is it different from social media? No, it's the same person. It's a different projection, but it's the same thing. but one where I don't have to think about what my face is doing. Like I have to go hide for a while. Like we'll get done with these panels and there's like lovely social stuff later tonight that I'm looking forward to. And I'm going to go back to the hotel room and do nothing for at least an hour so that I can enjoy it. Otherwise I won't. So, and I guess the last thing I want to say about it is like I said before, I hope I am never as well known and recognizable as someone like George R. R. Martin, because I think I'd have panic attacks where people could see.
Yeah, so my first book was published in 2020, so.
God.
Yeah, I had a couple of
You were a
years.
year later than me.
Yeah.
So.
It was 2 years where everything was virtual. So I came into the world as an author doing like Zoom and it's definitely different doing in-person events. So I was like, why am I spelling out IRL? IRL. Yeah, I was like, so, but it's been great. And I think it's probably one of my favorite parts about being an author is doing things like signings and meeting with. Okay, so when I teach classes of middle schoolers, sometimes it causes me anxiety because middle schoolers are the hardest audience to keep. But when they're into it, that's something really special.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, if I can just get their attention and get them to enjoy, building these fantasy worlds with me, then that's great. If they're being like wacky and rude, then I just like, I get a little bit anxious. So I've enjoyed it. I guess it's still kind of wrapping my head around the fact that people like actually want to get my signature and want to hear me talk about stuff. And but I'm grateful that you do. But yeah, I just try to just be myself. And when I'm signing, I do tend to chat a bit too much though. So when I'm doing like long signing lines, I have to have someone being like, it was Irene who works at Levine Corrido as an editor. They, for a few signings, they would just stand next to me and like, Darcie. And like, so they just keep it going. So as long as I keep the pace, I don't want to make people wait too long. That would be unfair of me.
I'm passionate about this topic because I've been a fan my entire life. And I have stood on the other side of that table since I was in elementary school. And so I've seen so many ways celebrities, whether it be writers or actors, treat people that I'm passionate about making a good experience because that moment sticks with them for their entire lives, be it good or bad. And what I have found when helping now, and before George, I was a real close friend of Ray Bradbury, and I would help him with signings all the time. And others, Joel with MST3K, I'm friends with and would help him with signings. But the biggest thing that I found to do is they get to me first. I open the book or get the photo out. I talk with them. I say, that's a great costume. Or I can see you've been a friend of George's for a long time, or oh my God, you've got a first edition. So we have this interaction while George is working with the other person. So by the time they get to George, I can say, George, this is Connie. And then they feel like they've already had quality time with me. So it extends in essence, George's quality time. And then George can say, oh, that is a great costume. And and sign the book while I'm doing this with the next person. And so it makes their time longer, having a good time. And they go away happy. And that is my ultimate goal in everything. And I have watched other people work lines like this where they're like, you can't have a photo and a book signed. You have to choose. And they're crying before they leave. And I want to slap somebody and it's not George. And that never on my watch. But I've had people at bookstores come to me afterwards and go, you were so nice to them. That other person had them crying. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Your fans should never leave crying for bad reason. This is it. And I have been to autograph shows with celebrities where One of them is just like screaming at people, mean.
Wow.
Nobody wants to get in that line. I mean, I think of some of the MASH actors, and some of them were darling and sweet, and then one of them was like mean to everybody, and then the ones that were darling and sweet were no longer selling autographs. My saying on this is, you're an actor, I'm paying you money. Act like you like me for 30 seconds. That's all that needs to happen. But nobody should ever leave crying. That, you know, they should do your best to smile and nod, because like Shatner never, back in the day, he wouldn't even look at the person, you know, no nerves, no nerves. And now he's better now. He finally figured out who was paying the bills. Much better at it. But honestly, that little bit of kindness, that just, you know, and if you can have an assistant, it really makes a difference. Because if they're a good assistant, they've done half your work for you already.
Oh, yeah.
It's taken
And
care
I
of.
would say good book staff too.
Yes,
Bookstore
yeah.
staff are really
So,
good.
That I'm passionate about, that 30 seconds needs to be okay for every person. Just nod and smile and think, they're buying my books. It's really nice that they like how I write. And then the next person comes. And if it's a lot of people, it's really hard. And I know that. And the assistant, what happens is, they have seen what you did. You got that book, and then you pass it to George. And then George talks to him for a second, says thank you, because they know the next book is waiting. And so that in and of itself keeps the line moving. You don't even have to say anything. You just, you know.
Structure.
And sometimes, you know, you look at it like, oh gosh, there's so many. Could we move on? You know, but gently, be nice. Okay. I'm really passionate about this, because once you've seen people cry,
It's horrible.
it's like, oh no, not happening, not on my watch. And Daniel and George kid me about these things.
Yeah.
Because she's so nice. And I went, yeah, because I know,
Someone needs
I've
to
been
be.
there.
Oh,
Been right there.
yeah.
Well, Lauren, I'm glad you mentioned bookshops, because that leads right into my next
Oh,
question,
goodness.
which is my last one before we open up. So, you know, as writers, you could be spending all your time writing, but you're not. You're spending your time doing other things. And so you have reciprocal relationships. Ideally, it's not just one-sided. It's not just you're signing and getting money and people aren't getting anything out of fan experience. But if you go and you're doing like a book reading, or you're at an event, what do you expect to get out of that? And what should the bookstore, convention, whoever, they expect to get out of that relationship?
That's a good way of putting. When I have been lucky enough to have personal relationships with a bookstore, and right now I am, which is wonderful, it has been a connection probably with some of the staff that started that. Like, I've done events at many, many bookshops, but some bookshops do like an event 3 times a week. And that, therefore, I'm the talent that night, and like, that's not personal. I'm here to do a job. My job is to make both me and the bookstore money, and to make the people who came here get what they came here for, which might be a reading, might be a discussion, might be just signed books, whatever the bookstore wants. But when you build a long-term relationship with a particular place, you start getting to do things that are a little bit different, like you show up at their book club for someone else. Or you get to do a joint event that you suggest a new author for them. Or that you and a bunch of people who are often there get to build something together with the bookstore. And I neither know nor care if this sells more of my books, because that experience is the one that would matter to me as a reader. And you were saying that like you have been a fan your whole life. The thing I identify as is as a reader, that I always want and to have like the access to the stories people make. So my best times in bookshops have been when I get to give people access to story in a way that is magical. And having a long-term relationship with the bookshop lets you do that.
Yeah, I wish that I lived near, I don't live near an indie bookstore in these days. I mean, when I'm down in Austin, I love Book People and Birch Bark Books, I believe in Minnesota. I like visiting when I'm in Minnesota, which is almost never. But I haven't really thought much about the relationships. It's more like I really like the people who work there because they're usually super passionate about books and know the good ones. So like I like just visiting just to first of all buy and restock my TBR, and by that I mean add to it because it's never at base level. But just being around other people who appreciate reading, and that includes the people who show up to events if I do them. I haven't done too many bookstore events compared to school events or conferences and things like this, but it would be cool to do more. I just have to. The bookstore I live next to now is a Barnes and Noble, so yeah, it's not.
You can get that to work. It takes a little bit more work, but not that much.
They're nice there. Like I do know a couple of people like by name because sometimes I go and work at the table. So that might work out. Yeah, it's within walking distance.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like bookstore events quite a bit. Like Arkady said, I think I go into it as like a in service to the bookstore and how I can be of service to them, because sometimes they're taking a chance on using their staff time to host me or my colleagues that I'm in joint appearance with. So I take that very seriously, and so I try to do good by them in terms of, you know, marketing that to my network, in terms of making sure I really understand what their expectations are for the event and I'm timely, you know, all those like, you know, finer points of etiquette and things like that, just so that I'm making it as streamlined for them as well, because I know they're all working very hard to do these things. But yeah, and I do see it as a long-term relationship because they're going to be doing festivals. They're going to have say, oh, I remember her. We can bring her in to put in this kind of situation here when you have a cancellation. So things like that. So you can be very strategic about these relationships, but it's also about building a community, because I'm not leaving Albuquerque anytime soon. There'll be times in the future when I might need to go to them and say, hey, I have this idea for an event. Can you accommodate me? And they're going to remember how that other event went, and I can leverage that going forward into the future. So I take it very seriously, and I think it's a really great resource if you can manage it.
One tiny answer to this, a backup plan. It's so hard for bookstores to actually gauge how many people are going to come. Sometimes you have a whole bunch of books left over. Sometimes, you know, you have 20 and 50 people have shown up and they're like not really happy. Some have brought their own books, okay, fine. Some have pre-ordered the books. Book plates. Have some professionally printed that you like, that have your name on them and a design that you like. Have them, you can sign them in front of them, or you can give some to the bookstore already signed. But they'll get something signed they can put in their book. And sometimes the bookstores will order them, but sometimes they're just plain. George has ones printed up that say GRRM and have kind of a little dragon in the background. And you know, Daniel and Ty, they got special ones printed up for The Expanse that has kind of fire and kind of like the art on the books. But those are a gift, not only to everybody that comes, but you can keep them in your office. And people say, I want to send a signed book. Okay, there's a million problems with that because they won't send you enough money for postage or not know how to do it. But you can send them the book plate for the price of a stamp. And don't send 7 if they ask, because they're probably selling them on eBay. But one
could be legit.
I have 3 grandchildren, and they all have all of the Song of Ice and Fire books. Can I have some for each grandchild? You know, okay, 21, or it's like, no, Mr. eBay, no. So backup plan, just saying. And if you've got the book plate yourself, you can set them in front of them, or you can give them already signed.
All right, well, we are at the point where we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. Yes.
Social media. Some authors talk politics on social media, some avoid it like the plague, some just hit the easy targets. Fascism bad, buy my book. So do you have a philosophy about that? Open question to anyone.
I mean, on Blue Sky, when I see something I like, I retweet it. I'm more of like an on the ground protester type of person. And I feel awkward. They say don't post pictures when you do that kind of thing. So I don't know. I kind of have to balance, like, is it unsafe to do that? I don't know. So like for me, Blue Sky, it tends to be my casual place, but I'm not afraid to share something political. Especially if I see someone who is really eloquent, put it in a way that I think, oh yeah, that's a good way to put it. So I'm not afraid to do it. It's just like not my primary mode of political activation or activism. Especially when it comes to tribal matters. Like I'll sometimes post about Lippon Apache matters there, but it tends to be more useful for me to go to the community, especially like, for example, I'm gonna have to go to Austin to talk about the benefits of a bill that's going to affect us, and go down to like Presidio to try to increase access to Spanish language books to the Lippon students there. So things like that. That tends to be what I primarily do. And sometimes I'll put that on my social media, but not as much as I do in the real day-to-day.
I have worked directly for Democratic politicians, and people know this, so it's fairly clear what. I also have worked directly for the state of New Mexico, which meant there were a lot of things that I knew about and wanted to say, could not legally say. And that has become extremely habitual. So I don't talk about things that wouldn't go in a press release or wouldn't be a problem if I was still working a job where my boss was the cabinet secretary of the state agency, which meant you can be as like opinionated as you want, unless it's about something specific that could need approval from either your agency or the governor. And that's just like how I think about it now, which is a little bit more severe than probably most people who deal with politics on social media. But honestly, the kind of politics I have are pretty clear from the kind of books I write and the kind of work I do in the world. So I also like repost things I think are interesting or useful or eloquent. Sometimes I'll repost things because I want the people, I have a relatively large following on Blue Sky, like many thousands, which is a little freaky. And some of those people do not usually see some of the things I see about like clean energy stuff, especially because that's a specialist field of knowledge and people can think that nothing is happening or only bad things are happening. And sometimes I know about really cool new things that are good and I want people to know about them. So I use social media in that way. And I will also do things that are functionally press release. I have used my social media platform as a place to build knowledge about political activity. Again, because I happen to have a relatively large following. But the actual political work I do is almost completely offline, and it is in state legislatures and in front of public regulation commissions. And while this is probably interesting, and some of it is public, I don't talk about it on the internet.
I do have to say though, it's funny. I do a lot of like flexing posts and powerlifting posts on Instagram. So like you get people following who think that's what I am. So then when, I know the fitness community is, yeah. So then I like will put like a story up and like you see like the people like immediately unfollow. I'm purging my social media. It's funny like that.
And yeah, they probably already know what I think and feel and donate to. So I know this on the one hand, but I've also gotten a lot more careful in terms of what I'd actually say. I'm doing a lot of retweeting. I'm not doing my own words right now. And I'm only doing those things on stories and on Blue Sky, not on more archival places like my website and my Instagram, actual, like the tiles on my Instagram. So I'm hoping that like the archival function will have, be like my clean area, and then the things that are more temporary, more, across the transom kind of thing, are where I have my reactions, or I'm retweeting or amplifying other voices.
Okay.
I think with all the guys I've worked for, they'd rather talk about something else, science, or ideas that other people find fascinating too. It's not that they don't have strong political beliefs, they do. And I know for Daniel and Ty, if you've ever read the Expanse books, it's incredibly inclusive. I mean, they've put their politics right there in their book, like you said, and George has enough to deal with. That, why are you talking about politics? You should be writing that book, I mean, they all have strong views, but let's talk about dire wolves, I mean, it's just, there's enough going on, and it's not that some of them don't put a little bit in, but I think they want to stay on topic as being a writer. Now, other places they might, and I know all of them support the issues they care about a great deal, a great deal. And you can look at all the stuff that George has done in Santa Fe for the community. He's tremendous amount, he's bought buildings, he's done this, he's done that. He supports 1 million charities, and that's his political statement right there. And Daniel and Ty do too. They're more quiet about it because they just want to stay Daniel and Ty writers. We're writers. Here we are. We write books. Okay, bye. So.
I mean, I think that part of the openness that I do on social media has to do with the age at which I came to social media and what social media was like and how I originally used it. If I had never done social media and I was told by my publisher, well, you should have a social media presence, I would not have very much of anything on it, except for things I was required to do. But because social media, all the way back from things like LiveJournal, like blogging, has been part of my self-expression in the world for my entire adult life, there might be a point at which I would change that deliberately for particular reasons, but it is, as long as I find it a useful way to be myself in the online world, I'll be myself in the online world.
I guess that a lot of times, rather than social media, sorry, I'm just dragging this on, I like to write nonfiction articles, especially because I do have insights. Yeah, we were a border tribe, so for example, I'm writing right now on how birthright citizenship can be one of those issues where Indigenous people, especially from people like the Lipan, they're not immigrants. But my grandma wasn't a citizen for a long period of her life because she was literally just born in this little town in Texas and no birth certificate, none of that, no hospital. And we had to search and find that baptismal record to show that she was born in Texas. But it was like, what about our elders who they don't have the federal protection of the BIA because we're Lipan? So what, are you gonna like deport them to Mexico? And it doesn't really matter if you're like, even if you're not Indigenous, what are we doing with this? So like I try to get my thoughts together in long form. So right now I'm working on an article for the Texas Observer, and I do have help with that. And I feel like that's really where I get most of my opinions out, because I struggle with the short form of like Blue Sky and Twitter. I was like, how do I put into words everything that I want to say? But yeah, it's a whole thing. I'm deep diving because we have so many of our community was like split by that border, and that border is running through our traditional homeland, and it's just one of 1 million issues that are just very frustrating right now. But yeah, so I hope that my nonfiction, like writing about the return of all burial ground, just all sorts of Indigenous matters that I feel like I have a really keen insight to that not a lot of people do. Not a lot of people know that we're dealing with these types of things because we're such a small group. But those of who are, I was like, I want people to know that we're here, and that our story is just one of many of people who are being, they're in great danger right now. They're being threatened. I mean, I'm married to a trans person. It's like, my God, we can never go live on my homeland in Texas at this rate. And just existing is political. So like, if I want to exist authentically, I guess I'm political. But same, like I love Taryn, and it pisses me off when people. All right, I don't want to get angry. I'm getting angry. But yeah, so it's very frustrating right now. But I'm like, I just need to write some nonfiction. So I'm kind of like putting some of my efforts into this. Right now, we're having some real trouble with the Social Security office because I'm trying to make some changes on some birth certificates. So whenever that gets done, we'll go out. But it's been a slog.
Thank you for that question, Brian. Does anyone else have any questions? Yes, Betty.
So I wonder if any of you have an example of something that you did that either had a great positive effect or a negative effect, either one, but like a marketing strategy, an appearance, that like, oh my gosh, after I made that appearance at that place, things just took off, or after I made that post, either good or bad, if any of you have any examples that you can like stick in your mind as like, that was something that really changed things.
I mean, I've gone viral a few times with a few million views, but the funny thing is when my posts go viral, they're for everything except for books. Like they're me wearing massive shoes or they're me
really cool shoes.
Oh, did you see that?
Yeah.
So it didn't change my
Like
book.
my
but-
Instagram will give me everything about like
Oh.
weird fashion, weird cool
Yes.
fashion, which means I curated it properly. So yeah. I don't have a specific example, but I have a specific time period. And it's actually something I learned as an academic when I was I didn't have a permanent academic home. I was doing a postdoc in Europe and I didn't know where I was going to be. And there was like a year where I literally said yes to everything. And those yeses started out for small things. And as I kept doing them, by the end of that time, because I had done it very deliberately, like I had sort of told myself this particular year, it happened to be like 2014, I was going to say yes to literally everything because I needed something to happen. By the end of that year, those yeses were very large and they involved moving to Sweden, which I did because, that was what I was doing right then. And that was a good idea at the time and I'm glad I did it. And I have at times done that with more writing oriented stuff too, just trying to not close off an opportunity, even if it seems impractical or difficult. Sometimes there are ways of pulling it off. Sometimes there are other ways of doing it, like, can it be a virtual thing? I can't physically be in two places at once, so can we fix this? Or I can't do this unless you all pay for my travel, but I really want to, so can you? Just being willing to ask those questions has been, I've done a lot of really cool things I would not have gotten to do had I not been willing to say yes and.
I've never gone viral, as myself. I have gone viral as an anonymous aspiring author. I was learning to write and I had a blog online and doing all this was like the days of Blogger. So like we were doing memes and exchanging things like that. And I was writing all these articles about what I was learning as I was formulating my own knowledge base at the time. And I had quite a lot of followers at the end of that. But as soon as I aged out of that, because I started publishing, they all went away.
Aww.
So it's I don't know. I think it's me, but I have lots of examples of other things that I could maybe make the connection to something that I might have done or something else that happened that was fortuitous. But honestly, a lot of it I can't. And so it's just been this slow accretion over time and slowly building up my body of work, and that's been the biggest benefit for me.
Not a question I can answer
Okay.
because I try to make nothing go viral with anything I could say that, that would be bad. So I never signed an NDA with George or Daniel because they knew they could trust me.
Oh.
And so it was not even a question with them. So, I mean, since they've changed to management firms, I had to sign one for Daniel because the management firm insisted on it. But it was because they knew I would never say something that would show up on Entertainment Tonight. Or just, no, they're my friends too.
Yeah.
So I'm trying never to go viral.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? All right, I'll ask a question and then you can think about it. All right, so I'm gonna kind of piggyback off when you talked about like, oh, I posted this and then they saw this and then they all unfollowed. Because all these digital promotional platforms like e-newsletters and Facebook offer statistical analytics, such as like how many people opened and read your email,
Yeah.
how many people react to your post, how many followers have we lost, how many have you gained? Have any of you ever used any analytical features? And what was your experience with that?
So I mean, Instagram does show us like the percentage of like how many people who are your followers versus non-followers. I have noticed that the algorithm has not been great for me. And I don't know if that's just because it's changed or if because I've been focusing more on Blue Sky. But I tend not to care too much as long as I feel like I like Blue Sky because they don't really use an algorithm in that way. So the people I follow, I see, and hopefully they see me. But it can be illuminating when you see a post really takes off with non-followers. Then it's kind of tempting to think, what did I do here? And how can I use this to reach people who might not necessarily know me? But then it's the shoe video all over again. Like they don't even want to read your writing.
I deliberately don't. Again, I think marketers despair of me. I just like don't know, don't care, can't. I like data, I like statistics a lot, but if I was going to use social media to try to grow my brand, I would be a different sort of person.
Yeah, no, I don't have enough to worry about.
All right, that's what I figured y'all's answers would be, but I just wanted to put it out there. And, yes.
Are any of you on Book Talk?
I'm bad at video.
So I used to have a TikTok and then I changed my phone number and I tried to get back into it and I am unable to access my book TikTok. So I just have a pug TikTok now and that's been taking off. My pug's more popular than I am. But yeah, no, I've never really figured out the book talk angle, but I think that people would think I was trying too hard if I did. So it's like, I'll just hope they organically start talking about my work.
Yeah, I feel like that's a fan space, not so much an author space personally, but everyone's different.
If I was gonna do it, it would be all like William Gibson pattern recognition style, like super obscure, kind of like a piece of something, 10 seconds of video, nothing for a month.
There'd probably be a lot of overlap between fans and like pup talk.
Yeah.
Did you have your hand raised?
No.
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't missing. We still have 5 minutes, guys. I have got a couple questions, but I'd rather have yours. Yes, Craig.
Well, my comment. I was going to say, actually, as somebody who's worked in a bookstore for a long time and been a fan, and then also run a science fiction convention now, is one of the things, at least in the Mexico environment, is that one thing you can remember when you're on that side of the table is that most of the people that, at least now, if you're coming to events, want to be your cheerleader. They really do. So they're not there to really to tear you down or anything. They want you to succeed. We say that at the Science Fiction Club all the time when people come and talk to the club, whether they're an author, an artist, or what have you, is that people want you to succeed. So there's always that. And I think if you get to know your local community, you start especially knowing which people are safe and which fans, and as con organizers, or even if just con attendees, we know the fan says like, okay. And sometimes we'll block them from authors. And that's a lot. It's just always lean on the people that you know that are safe and are there they want to be your friends. And I have to say from this side of the fence too, is I've always found the experience better if you treat the person that you're going to see as a human being,
Yes.
and if you know something about them beyond their book, and I don't mean something creepy, but I mean like you know that they were going to a dog show last week, you can say, how was the dog show? But which is, you know, more of a human interaction. I find that when I get books signed, it's because I had that human connection with an author. It's not really so much like, oh my God, I met this person. I mean, okay, maybe Stephen King was a little bit, but it still was more, I saw them, I listened to them talk. And so part of that signature is going into your mind as a memory.
I gotta say, my best memory of a book signing was when a librarian challenged me to a push-up contest. And she won. So these were straight push-ups, and I was done at like 25 because I gotta take a break. She was just kept going, and I was like, how are you doing this? She challenges her kids at the library to push-ups. So she's been training with the best. And I love that moment.
That
So,
is
like,
far
that's
cooler
great.
than anything that has ever happened.
Yeah, it's
to me.
like speaking about saying something that's personal. I really enjoyed that connection that we made.
I just
Well, yeah.
wanna-
It goes in your memory longer because it was a personal connection.
I have to say one thing about fan mail. If you get a manuscript, don't open it, don't read it, because if they have a rocket in there and you put a rocket in your story,
Oh,
they're gonna sue you later
Mhm.
because
Yes.
you stole their story. I mean, all of that comes to me
Yeah.
and I archive it, but I never show it to Daniel.
Mhm.
It never, you can watch it, come into my email and go into an account, go into a book, but I never tell him what's in there. And you can, it's sad because you think, oh, this person really wants me to read their stuff. It's very similar to mine, but you cannot, ever. And I'm sure you've had agents and stuff tell you this because I've watched it happen. I sent you this 20 years ago and you had this in your book or your TV show and I want money. And then it costs lawyers and private investigators on your behalf to get this to go away.
Yeah.
And even though there's absolutely nothing about it that's true, it still takes lawyers and private investigators, which is unpleasant for your bank account.
And your personal life.
Yeah. And sometimes it's scary. I mean, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes when you and the person you work for can make a joke out of it, but not where everybody knows.